All right, we're back again on Monday night. Appreciate you guys taking time out of your evening to come hang out with me and ask great questions. Got a lot of fun stuff to cover tonight when it comes to digital assets, estate planning, taxes, all the fun stuff that you guys show up for. We're over here on YouTube, on X, on Facebook, and over here on TikTok. Again, appreciate y'all taking time out of your evening to watch, and those for those that listen back to this later on. We get a lot of views on these. Like, it is wild to me. Uh, I mean, some of these have 50, 60, 70,000 views in the days that kind of follow the lives, which is just, again, blown away that people want to take that much time out to listen to me. But I am very humble. I'm humbled and I am grateful. I feel very blessed to be able to share time with you guys. And y'all ask great questions. That's why I keep coming back. I enjoy doing these. I get a lot of fulfillment from them. We got some person over here in the chat that say it's Blake Griffin. I can live with that. Like I said, I'll take that compliment. Before we get into it tonight, we do have a lot of things happening out there in the macro that are in alignment with what we think. Well, I don't know about what I think is going to happen in the near future here. We've got things seem to be escalating over there with Iran. You got the U.S. military hanging out in the bay over there, the Strait of Oman, and looks like they may be running exercises in that area. You've also got Iran shutting down airspace for the next 3 months, except for very specific travel over the region. We've also seen Lloyd's of London start to increase the cost of insurance moving through the Strait of Hormuz. It's up 3 times what it was just a few weeks ago. So that tells me that they might know a little something about some conflict that might be escalating there in the Middle East in the not too distant future. We got silver. I don't know if you guys have been living under a rock, but like, I said 100. I was off. Okay. Like, I did not think that we were going to see the meteoric rise of this asset this quickly, but that just tells you how much paper silver is out there. They do not have enough to cover the contracts that are outstanding on the COMEX, and there's a couple of different ways that they can implement things to, smash the price back down or cover these. They can move to cash payouts to be able to cover the positions if they can't actually deliver the physical silver to people that are taking it. We've got a ton of contracts that are closing here on the 30th and 31st of this month. And so, with all that being said, we'll have to see, how things kind of finally play out here. I don't know what they're going to do. We did see silver fall and gold fall a little bit today, but after a huge run up, like that was expected. The next candle, the next 24 hours is going to play a big role in which direction silver continues to move. If we do see it continue to creep back up and continue to climb, bad news for the COMEX. But if they have turned it around here and they are able to push it down, you could see it fall all the way back to $50, which is what I think is probably the more likely scenario. Again, I don't know if that's going to be an immediate deal, but I do think silver is going to revisit $50 at some point over the next year. Same thing with gold. I do think that gold is going to revisit around 2,000, 2,100 over the next year. And that could be, after July when they shore up the financial system. We've got a lot of things culminating here for midsummer. You've got Rosie Rios over there at New Year's with the ball drop for the 2026, and they said that they will be back on July 4th. With that happening again, ringing in the 250th anniversary of the United States of America. And alongside that, Judy Sheldon believes and hopes, and I think will, be able to implement a gold-backed 50-year bond for the U.S. government to be able to shore up our treasuries here in 2026. So all of that culminating. And in addition to that, you've had the Clarity Act spin back around here. I was on a podcast a little bit earlier today with Verson and Digital Outlook, Dave over there, and then also Ito. And we ran down a bunch of these things about the Clarity Act and the reverse carry trade. If you haven't seen that, I would encourage you to go watch that. We did that live a little bit earlier today, but a very good conversation. Appreciate them having me on. And I think there's a lot of value there from people that want to go listen to it. But one of the things we did discuss was the Clarity Act. And, we all want that to happen here in 2026. I do think that it will. I do think that XRP will appreciate before the Clarity Act gets passed, which I've stated many times. But alongside that, they have done a remarkup of it. I have seen the full thing. We sit on the digital chamber, and so they're nice enough to share that stuff with us a little bit prior to when it goes out to the public. And it looks like they have come to some pretty fair compromises on everything as far as, the DeFi legislation and the ability to continue to hold your stuff in cold wallets and participate in the ecosystem that way. They've provided some guidance and rails around what it's going to look like to participate in DeFi with AML and KYC. And then in addition to that, people are going to have to do all those things to move their assets into institutional custodians. One of the conversations that we've had recently talked about, KYC and AML, and they will only take assets from other recognized parties. They won't even take assets in from a cold wallet. So, with all that being said, I do think that these large institutions, many people, and myself included, have wanted to be able to participate with a Fidelity or a Schwab or, all of the big players out there to be able to custody your assets and generate a return very safely on those. At Digital Wealth Partners, we continue to push those conversations forward. And I do think that we will likely be first to market with those products for XRP. We're also first to market for the Bitcoin product. If you guys didn't hear me, last week talk about that, we are starting off with Fidelity, custodying assets there, and 2Prime running a strategy that has never liquidated collateral over the last 5 years. Those that put in Bitcoin in 2020 are up 38%. They have 38% more Bitcoin today than they did when they started. So if you put in 100 Bitcoin in 2020 into the strategy, you would now have 138 Bitcoin today here in 2026. So if that's interesting to you, if you have, over $500,000 worth of Bitcoin and you want to be able to hold it in institutional custody at Fidelity, and you want to be able to, generate roughly 1% a month on average is their average return over there, you can reach out to Digital Wealth Partners and they can have that conversation. It is for accredited people only on that deal. And a lot of these products and solutions that we're bringing to market do meet that criteria. We are a regulated, financial institution, and therefore have to meet all those obligations and reporting requirements and all that stuff. So all that being said, if you do meet that criteria, you do have that much Bitcoin, and you want to be able to generate a return on it, then reach out to Digital Wealth Partners. Looking forward to some of the products we're going to be bringing to market for XRP this year. We'll talk more about those as they do come to fruition. So with the Clarity Act, again, they put together that markup, and it looks like they were going to, talk about it tomorrow. Well, that didn't happen. They've kicked the can a couple days down to Thursday this week, which is the day before the government shutdown. We'll see if, I don't know if the funding bill got passed through the House or the Senate, but it's got to go through the other one. And then it will be pushed to the president's desk in order to be able to be signed into law and to fund the government. If they don't get that done by Friday this week, guess what? We have another government shutdown. So, if you wanted to leave that lingering out there in case things don't play out in a certain amount of time, that's a good way to do it. And then the Clarity Act likely, would continue to get punted. And like I've talked about before, if we don't get something done this month, it looks like it's probably going to be at least Q2 with the government shutdown and midterms before, they're actually going to be able to mark that up and get it through the Senate, back to the House, and then over to the president's desk in order to be able to sign it into legislation. And even with the markup being talked about Thursday, it's still, unless we do get the funding bill passed, which we absolutely could, still probably unlikely that that's going to see any, signing into law until at least February, could be later on than that. And we also have the SEC and the CFTC sitting down on Thursday this week to talk about how they've been outlined. They've been given, their guardrails in this new Clarity Act that's been written out that seem actually, pretty fair in the way that they're going to be governing different digital assets based on what's tokenized and, what's a security and what's a commodity. And I'm glad. I'm glad that we're going to have, real laws and legislation here in the U.S. That will allow those regulatory bodies to understand what their rails are and where they need to focus their attention. So that's where we're at as of today. We'll go ahead and jump into the questions here. Again, appreciate you guys taking time out of your Monday night to come hang out with me. There's a super chat. We got 7U. He says, or she says, not sure. He says, wife. Okay, so it's a he. Appreciate you. Wife wants to move to Texas after 5-digit XRP. We would have $750 to $800 million. Advice: never been to Texas, and is it realistic to be able to move end of Q2 2027? So I've lived in Texas my whole life. Born and raised in Dallas. I've been to Austin, Houston, San Antonio, all over the great state of Texas. It is, in my opinion, the best place to live. I wouldn't live there otherwise. Everybody there is very nice. They will hold the door for you. They will ask you how you're doing. I'm here in Florida today. You guys can see my background's a little different. I'm here in the hotel room, hanging out with you guys. People here are very similar. There was multiple people, that I made eye contact with today, asked me how I'm doing, small talk. Very different than up north. And nothing bad about up north. I just prefer that, being from the South. That's how I am. So I don't know where you live currently, but you could absolutely move to Texas. Population is continuing to grow in Dallas and surrounding areas. And property prices are now significantly higher than what they were before. But if you got $750 to $800 million, I think you'll be fine. I think you can find a very nice place in your price range. Anywhere in Texas, to be honest with you. Now, if you're trying to live, downtown and have some land, you're gonna be spending a lot. Highland Park is pretty stiff. If you're in an affluent area, Plano, Frisco, places that have appreciated a lot in value, you're going to be spending, $1, $2, $3, $5 million to be able to purchase, a decent sized home in those areas. But if you're further out like I am, still very economical, you just have to drive a little ways in order to get to stuff. And that's the other thing I would say is very different about Texas. A lot of other states have public transportation, and so does Texas. We have trains and we have buses, but a lot of other places have a subway, or you walk from point A to point B. Austin's kind of like that. If you like that feel, downtown Fort Worth, people walk around. Downtown Dallas really doesn't have, we have a nightlife, but it's not easily traversed. It's pretty spread out. And so most people drive from one place to another. And, it takes 10 hours to drive all the way across the state. So if that tells you anything, not sure where you live, if you live up north or in another state, but there's not many other states where you can drive 10 hours and you don't go through at least a couple other states like Texas. I think the only other one would really be like Alaska. So we would love to have you, all about more wealth moving to Texas and cool people. And if you are invested in XRP, I would expect that you meet that criteria. We got Mr. Claus. He says, ho, ho, ho. I want to leave my biz and crypto to go after on after I die. How does that get structured? Don't want family to have it. So do I need to turn my LLC into a nonprofit after I die, and then my crypto can fund the biz? There's a lot of different ways that you can do it. There's no right or wrong way to structure your estate. You have all these different tools. I would encourage you to listen to a couple different podcasts. I just did one with Dan Plaskett to talk about living trust or revocable living trust. There is no EIN associated with that. It's only probate protection that you're going to get there, and that's why we marry it with an LLC for people to be able to manage your digital assets and get creditor protection, anonymity, and probate protection, like you would get from an irrevocable trust. Dynasty Trust, I just made a video about that will be dropping here in the next week or two. That's what we've used. I think that that's a great option for people, especially if you want to be able to pass the income and the ability to access capital to future generations without having the estate or gift tax whacked every time it gets passed on. Some people do a generational skipping trust. I laid all of that out in the video that's coming out, but that's one way to do it. As far as your business goes, you would want to move the equity at least into your revocable trust so that it's going to go, past probate and get to the heirs, and they can then take control of the business or do whatever they're going to do with it without it becoming public record who owns how much, which is what probate does. Also, people get a little squirrely when there's a bunch of money involved. So if you can appropriate that specifically to each individual while you're still alive, because you have a revocable living trust, it means you can still change things. You could be the trustee, the grantor, and the beneficiary on a revocable living trust. That would be what I would look at. And you can definitely do more complex estate planning, right? If you plan to sell your business, there are some options there. Life insurance always plays a role. We have Exure Legacy over there that's helping people with their term life insurance, and then many other different types of life insurance, depending on what you need. Nonprofits definitely play a role. Like I said, we had that podcast with myself and Dan Plaskett, and we went over charitable remainder trust. We went over donor advised funds. We went over private foundations. We went over public charities, and all those different tools that you can use to be, have a big effect for people in a philanthropic way, if you do feel so inclined. And you can add your kids onto the board of your family foundation. You can have an endowment inside your foundation. It's a little bit more cumbersome if you're doing that. And that may be public charities that the endowment's required for. I'd have to go look at that. Again, I'm not an expert on all these things. I work with the experts to make sure that we are providing people the best solutions in those situations. But what it really comes down to, to be able to make sure that you're using the tools that are appropriate for what you want done would be to really sit down and define a mission statement for your family, core values and principles, maybe draft some governance documents around things, who gets what with, when, why, for what purpose, what benefits you're going to afford family members, and at what point. And then, once you have all that in place and you have some guidelines on that, that's when you can start to look at all the breadth of tools that are out there to help you accomplish all those things. And again, trusts, at the end of the day, they're just contract law. You can have all different types of provisions in your trust. It could be a dynasty trust with spendthrift provisions. It could be a spendthrift trust with, a three strikes component to it. There's all different things that you can put in there. I would highly recommend, talking to a tax attorney and an estate planner, and ideally they're going to understand digital assets. There's a couple other offices in Wyoming that do a good job. And then obviously, my bias is that you would talk to us. And again, you don't have to use us, but at least, if you have a consult with us, you're going to get the education and you're going to know what questions to ask when you're going around getting quotes on stuff, to make sure that, you're educated and can make the best decisions for you and your family. And if you want to schedule a consult, you can, go over to our website. It's digitalfamilyoffice.io, or you can just shoot us an email at info@digitalfamilyoffice.io. I'd probably go the email route. If you do have a bit more complex estate planning, most of the people that we have the initial consults with have a basic understanding very similar to myself about all these things, and then they would direct you to the right person. But if you just email and say, hey, I've got a bit more complex situation, who would you recommend? They'll probably just go ahead and pass you on to the right person, and you may not need to pay that $300. again, probably shooting myself in the foot here, but I want people to have access to resources. We need to make money in order to be able to pay our employees and do all the stuff that we're doing and continue to scale and meet demand. But at the end of the day, it is about providing people the best resources and the most value that we can. All right. Next one here says, with the companies Ripple has already acquired, is there any other company/companies you think of that would make Ripple even more competitive and versatile? A lot of the ones they acquired last year, I didn't necessarily have on the roadmap. Rail made a lot of sense for the stablecoin component. Palisade made a lot of sense for the licenses and the custody that they have over there in that jurisdiction. As they expand globally, they may continue to purchase specific players in different regions that already have licenses. They seem to have acquired the majority of the licenses they need to be able to transact globally at this point. But with that being said, I wouldn't be surprised to see them buy, a broker dealer. They don't currently have a broker dealer. They have a prime broker. If they are going to get into trading, tokenized securities in the private equity markets or through other means, I don't think that they will acquire a wealth advisor, just based on, at least, in the context I have there is, so we originally, custody assets with standard custody. And this was 2023 into 2024. And actually take that back, 2024 into, no, yeah, it was 23 into 24. And, when we talked to them, they actually moved us out of standard custody. They said, we don't really have any interest in working with wealth managers at that time anyway. And so, we ended up moving over to Anchorage with Digital Wealth Partners. And I've obviously done really well there. Close to $1 billion in AUM, down a little bit now because of the price action that we've seen here recently. But with that being said, I think that they could acquire a broker dealer. They may get a transfer agent license. I don't know that they'll get into that space with Ondo and Securitize already pretty well cemented there. They obviously have relationships with those companies. You saw some of them on the same panel there at the World Economic Forum, including BlackRock. They've had many people like that at Swell each year when they put that conference on. So it'll be interesting to see. But with the breadth of companies that they have and the product Ripple One that they brought to market, which is a full breadth of services from treasury management to the prime broker services to stablecoin issuance and management, I really think they have a really robust end-to-end solution that they're bringing to market right now at this time to be able to meet demand that's going to be moving in from these large corporations that want to hold treasury of XRP or utilize their stablecoin for treasury management. G Treasury was huge, and then we saw another partnership the other day with XDM, it wasn't XDC, it was DXC. It was like, what did they say? 300 million accounts that they now are, potentially partnering with Ripple on. Big deal. So I think they'll continue to aggregate partnerships like that. They'll obviously continue to make strategic investments in startups and other people developing things on the XRPL. But with liquidity pools coming on chain, with that amendment here in 2026 at some point, I think that those are going to need some oversight by somebody. And it's likely going to be a licensed entity that is the one participating in those ecosystems with that oversight. Because there needs to be accountability, there needs to be some type of recourse if something goes wrong, and there needs to be a little bit of policing so that we don't see, other hacks and issues like we have in the past when things are completely decentralized. So I think it'll be a blend, but a broker dealer would allow them to do that. You've already had, Archax, which is a strategic investment of Ripple, acquire a broker dealer here in the US. They're waiting on transfer of control. And then they will be able to operate that, here stateside. And then there's obviously, interest that they have in Singapore and Dubai, and then the broader EU and Australia. Shout out to the Australian event that's going to be happening here in February. I'm not attending that one this year, but I think that there's going to be a large group from that are international attending that. So if you have the chance, if you would like to go to Sydney, I think that that'd be a cool experience. And I'm sure they would love to have you. All right, next up we got Chomp Master. He says, Jake the Snake, what's up, my dude? Quick question on supply shock. How much XRP is still out there on OTC versus exchanges and dark pools? Feels quiet lately, and I can't find a clear update. We had 22 million in inflows today on the ETFs. So continuing to see, these ETFs eat XRP off of the OTC desk and dark pools. FalconX was acquired by 21 Shares. So their dark pool and OTC desk, I'm sure, is exclusively being used for that one. And really, you don't think we have much here, but we do have another escrow release coming out in the coming days, another 4 or 5 days away here on the 1st that's 5 days away. On the 1st of February, there will be another escrow release for Ripple. Up to date, over the last year, they've been re-escrowing about 700 million XRP, and they've been releasing about 300 million onto the market. That 300 tends to make its way over there to the dark pools and the OTC desk. So, I don't think that there's a whole lot left right now, but here in another 5 days, there could be a lot more. Now, if Ripple wanted to, push things along for a supply shock, all they would have to do is re-escrow that total billion and not put any onto the market. And at some point, they're going to be incentivized to do so because they want XRP to appreciate just like everybody else does. I think that there needs to be some timing around that in order to push it up when they need it. But we'll just have to see what they do with the escrow here in the next 5 days. A couple more super chats. Awesome. Brooks, he said, what's up, legend? Appreciate you, my man. Thank you for the super chat. He says, if the price of XRP is manipulated, then why not manipulate it upwards? Well, we just talked about how they could do that. He says, wouldn't they benefit financially by pushing the price up rather than keeping it suppressed? Bless you and your family. But they absolutely would. Their share price would go significantly higher. They would have a lot more liquidity to be able to transact with their business. This person says he needs help in Canada. I would reach out to Aaron Grinhaus. We've had him on the podcast a few different times. He is proficient with Canadian tax law and U.S. tax law. So if you're Canadian watching this, stay warm up there. I'm in Florida, and it's a little brisk for me here. So I can't imagine what it's like up there in Canada. But again, Aaron Grinhaus is who I would reach out to. His email is AARON, like Aaron, at grinhauslaw.ca. And if you can't figure that out and it's hard to, find him, you can go to the videos that I have with him on the channel, and I'm sure his contact is there in the link below. But when it comes back to the question here with Ripple, they're currently at a $40 billion valuation. As it sits today, that's where Citadel and Fortress and many others just invested about $500 million into their company. They announced that at Swell. So that was just 3 months ago that was going on. And, we've seen their share price come down a little bit on the private markets. Right after Swell, it was trading around 170, 180 per share, and we're back down to around 140 right now. And then it ebbs and flows, just like stocks do, right? Private markets will trade depending on, where Ripple's buying shares back, because they do have the ROFR provision on their common shares, not their preferred shares. And, you can kind of see, I don't think I've ever said this publicly, well, maybe one time before. If you want to go chart private equity and you want to go look up like Anthropic, or you want to go look up other private companies like SpaceX, you can go to notice, notic.co. And they do a really good job. They're out of the Cayman Islands, and they do, it's pretty cool. They actually aggregate all the data across the brokers, and then they map that out and chart it. So it's really cool to see like a chart for private stocks. It's not something that's normally out there, and that'll give you a good idea on where the price of things is actually trading. Now they have a forecasting algorithm, so sometimes it's off a little bit, but they are aggregating actual sells and buys on the open market to be able to display that information. So I would go check it out if you have not, especially if you want to get into private equity. Liner says, smash the like button. I always forget to say that. If you wouldn't mind, please like, subscribe. It does help the algorithm. And yeah, we do these every Monday and Wednesday night. So if you like this, you're getting value. We would love to see you back again. This person, because I'm going to butcher their name, thank you for the super chat. Carbon 1 member, awesome. Glad to see you in the mastermind. How much longer for $100 XRP? Is it possible if it don't go to 3 digits in 2027? Thank you, brother, for all you do. Again, I'm going to continue to harp on oil. You guys know I've been talking about this for a long time. I just put out the 4th iteration of the domino theory. If you haven't seen that, go check it out on the YouTube channel. I break it down very clearly, what I think is going to happen in the cascade of events that's going to lead to a 3 and 4 digit XRP. Until we actually get those things, we're going to continue to trade in this pattern that we have now. Until there's a supply shock that drives XRP substantially higher, we're $2, and maybe it could continue to fall down. There's liquidity leaving the crypto market at this point. Many people believe we are entering a bear market. I think things will be repriced in the not too distant future as all of these global macroeconomic events play out. Again, we talked about a lot of those at the beginning of this, but oil, I do believe, will be the catalyst inevitably that will force the Bank of Japan to raise interest rates. They held last week, and the Fed, we've got them coming up here in a few days. I think they're going to hold also. Neither one of them want to be the bad guy that sets off the reverse carry trade and causes a global liquidity crisis, which is what will happen. Again, those are the things that I think will lead to gold and silver plummeting in value back down to retest their previous all-time highs before they continue up and to the right again. Or maybe they get repegged somewhere, right? A lot of people think that there's going to be a repricing where they have to peg gold and silver to certain prices that will stabilize currencies. I think they're going to peg gold to oil in a specific ratio, and that's going to be the peg that kind of sits at the crux of everything else. And then XRP will move all of that value globally. But again, to your point, it's got to be a much higher price in order to do that. And the only way we get there is through a supply shock. We've got AWAGS 16. They say, hey, Jake, how quick is the turnaround when it comes to borrowing against your XRP? Carbon 1 member, Wyoming LLC and Trust. Awesome. Waiting on bank application. Couldn't have done it without you and your team. Thank you, man. I really appreciate that. And thank you for being proactive. Sounds like you've set yourself up and your family for the best opportunity that you can in the current conditions. We have a couple different partners that provide liquidity against XRP. I do not condone nor advocate for people borrowing against their XRP. There are a lot of risks associated with that. You need to make sure you understand all the risks associated with that. You want to make sure you're able to cover your collateral obligations if the price falls, and you're able to make the monthly payments that are interest only, simple interest only. So again, going back to the few partners that we have Maple Finance, we have Galaxy Digital, we have Arch Lending, and maybe a prime broker in the near future. But as of today, Arch Lending has the majority of our clients. We've just seen that's the easiest one to get through, and that sounds like what you want. You can get funded in as little as 45 minutes from them. They do hold the assets at Anchorage. And if you're part of the mastermind, like you said, and you have a Wyoming LLC, the minimum for them, I think, is $25,000 for their loan. Used to be lower than that, but they've raised it now. And so, if you have their 45% LTV, a few of the other lenders are 50 or 55% LTV. The interest rates are somewhere between 13 and 15% most of the time, which is not cheap, but it's liquidity if you need it. So again, not advocating or condoning or trying to get you to do it. But if you are in the mastermind, you can just email info@beyondbroke.com. And if you are Carbon One, then you absolutely have access. We have an exclusive deal with Arch Lending on XRP. Also looking at Lantern Finance, they are able to provide liquidity against HBAR, XLM, and a few of the other digital assets that many people, watching this and in the mastermind hold. So we'll see, how much longer that takes to get across the line, but I'm hopeful for that one. There's been a few people discussing that there in the group, but we're still doing due diligence, and we will let you guys know what that looks like. I believe they hold their assets at BitGo, so a little bit different. Although BitGo did just get their OCC license, it's preliminary, just like Ripple's right now. So they technically are an OCC federally chartered bank, and I like BitGo. There's a couple other custodians alongside them that I think are doing a good job, and obviously Anchorage is our partner. So again, appreciate you being part of the mastermind, setting up the LLC and the trust. If you guys didn't check out the webinar, I would recommend doing so, especially if you're part of the mastermind. Again, we had Dan Plaskett and myself talk about the revocable living trust and how you marry that with the LLC, holding your digital assets in Wyoming, and the assignment component of assigning the interest in the LLC to the trust. I've talked about this before, but it's important, so I'm going to harp on it a little bit. My dad died October 4 years ago. And when he passed, he had thought he set up a trust. And he did. There was a legal entity that was passed through that was a revocable living trust that he had structured during his lifetime, but he never assigned anything to it. The house wasn't in it. The bank accounts weren't in it. His investment accounts weren't assigned to it. His business equity wasn't assigned to it. It was just a shell. So he paid however much he paid. I think he downloaded stuff on like Nolo, which is an online thing. And then he had an attorney look over it and sign it. He may have spent, a couple grand on it and then never effectuated it. So if you're going to do it, go through all the steps, work with the right people, make sure you're having those conversations to make sure that you are going to use it if you set it up. We do living trust for $500. It is cheaper than anybody else out in the market doing that. We use Will and Trust, and they do a fantastic job. It's a basic revocable living trust in your state. If you need something more complex, you should probably go see an attorney. Like if you've got other real estate and toys and gold and family heirlooms and a bunch of stuff that you want to put in it, you can still do that with the basic living trust that we structure for people. But if you want additional provisions and something outside the scope of what's in there, you're probably going to want to talk to another attorney. But if you need something that's basic, get it in place and then iterate on it as you go. We provide a fantastic product for that. And right now, if you use the code webinar trust, you can get the assignment along with the trust for $800. And then if you set up the LLC, you can use the code, 50 off 50 OFF DAG LLC. They get you everything end to end for $2,000. If you use both those codes, you can get everything for $2,800, which is a steal. There's not going to be anybody else out there that's going to structure it and do the assignment and give you a template for the operating agreement and do all the other stuff that we're doing for that price. Now, there are other attorneys out there. Again, I would encourage people to go shop around, go talk to different people, ask the right questions. If you talk to us, we're going to tell you the questions to ask. And hopefully, there's going to be other people that can answer them too. We just, again, want to provide people resources and education to make sure that they are in a position to take care of themselves and their family. So those are the two codes. Again, it's webinar trust, all capitalized. If you want that $200 off the assignment. And if you've already done the trust with us or another trust, you have a revocable living trust and an LLC that you want to assign that equity to it. Or if you want the whole kit, bang, and caboodle, again, $2,800 all in. All right, James, he says, leg does not, LEG does not nat gas rise DG 25% today, hurt or do nothing to trigger the reverse carry trade. I hadn't seen that. Again, we talked about the Strait of Hormuz and the insurance increasing there at the beginning of this. Lloyd's of London has increased their shipping insurance through that strait. And, I think that they probably know that there is likely going to be conflict that escalates there. And that's why they're raising the cost on that. If Iran does shut down the strait, you can bet your biscuits oil in Japan is going to rise a lot faster and a lot higher, which will lead to price appreciation for XRP. So as far as natural gas goes, I think that could just be because of the cold here in the U.S. We have a lot of people putting strain on the system right now, using natural gas to be able to heat their homes. I don't think that that's going to impact the reverse carry trade because it's clearly going to be oil priced in yen that's going to be the catalyst there. All right. Next up, we got Truth of Hearts. I love the name. They say, Jake, KT baby here. Awesome. Good to see you. Tell us everything. Silver, good or bad? US dollar, is a reverse carry trade happening? Point to the purple in the painting behind you if you think within 2 weeks for price appreciation. Again, my legal team has advised me not to give timeframes on any of this stuff and stick to the macro. But I will say things look spicy. Things look like they could move at any point. We just need an escalation and conflict there in the Middle East that causes them to cut off or use a choke point on supply routes for oil, and we're off to the races. So, not a whole lot's changed since the end of last year. One thing that is different is Ripple got their licenses in the UK. We now have permission domains on the XRPL approved, and we're in the 2-week holding period until that's implemented on the mainnet. That's going to be a big deal for institutional adoption of the XRPL. They would need a way to be able to tie their digital ID and their credentials to a permission domain to be able to participate in different ecosystems and products. But they can absolutely use the XRPL for settlement now as things sit today. Again, with the clarity that we have for XRP as not a security here in the US. When it comes to silver, we went over that a little bit earlier. Really, the next 24 hours is going to tell me what's going to happen. If we do see a leg down or continue down, I think we could see as low as $50 silver. Again, I think that we will still see that at some point this year. Could it go higher than this? Again, I thought $100, so maybe it sure could. It's not good for the COMEX though, and we have a lot of contracts coming due here at the end of the month in January. So, and I would expect that most of those people will not roll. They will be collecting that silver, and the COMEX will have to do something to be able to mitigate those losses because they don't have the silver to cover. All right. Anything over here on TikTok? I always forget about you guys, and I apologize for that. I try to make sure we focus on, all the super chats. Blue says, we won't hold you to anything, Jake. Just looking for generalities on info. Appreciate your expertise. Thank you. I appreciate that. And again, I try to be pretty clear with, where things are at and what I'm looking for. This person said, should I give up on XRP? Look, I can't tell you what to do, and that's probably a good time for my disclaimer. Anything said here is not financial advice. It's only for entertainment and educational purposes. If you need financial advice, I would go talk with a financial advisor. Digital Wealth Partners is great for that. They're the only RIA in the world, as far as I'm aware, that will actually consult with you and give you financial advice for your crypto and your digital assets. Now, obviously, I'm going to talk about my positions. I continue to buy XRP any chance that I get. It's my only position aside from, a very small investment in Hash, which I've talked about before. You should not make your financial decisions based on my financial decisions. I'm probably not in the same financial position as you. You may be much older than me. You may have different income than me. You may have different bills than I have. There's a lot of things that are nuances and context and that go into making financial decisions. When it comes to XRP, again, long time horizon. Most people, that we talk to, obviously we have over 3,000 clients that have more than 50,000 XRP, but I know that's not normal. Okay. We're dealing with most of the time high net worth individuals or people that just, sucked it up and bought a lot of it during the bear market when it was 20 cents, 30 cents, 40 cents. Now, the average person, if you've got, 100 XRP, 500 XRP, 10,000 XRP, you're probably still going to be waiting even post price appreciation for another couple years to be able to see a $10,000 XRP. I think end of 26, early 27, mid 27, somewhere in there. Once derivatives are tokenized and moved on to the XRPL and XRP is settling those, you could see easily a $10,000 XRP. At that point, even if you had 1,000 XRP, you've got, what would that be? $1 million? More than that. $10 million? You'd have $10 million. Which, if you could put to work and earn 5%, you're clipping $500,000 a year. You're doing pretty good. So, again, and I'm predicating these timeframes based on conversations that were had at Swell. Okay. When we were at Swell, many of the financial institutions there, including State Street, BlackRock, Fidelity, and others, were giving timeframes of 2027 to 2028 for the actual total adoption and tokenization of all of the financial markets that we see today. So over the next 2 years, you are going to see the tokenization of all these markets, FX, commodities, the stock market, all kinds of things, carbon credits, private credit, private debt, bonds, treasuries, and then other derivatives will probably be on the latter end of that. And that's why I say probably, late 26 or 27 when we're going to see those assets move on chain. And XRP has to have enough liquidity to be able to settle all of that. And that's how we get to a $10,000 XRP. So again, not here to give you financial advice. Sometimes you got bills to pay and you got to sell what you got in order to be able to do that, or figure out a side hustle or do other stuff. I know not everybody has a high level of income. For the majority of my life, I did not. I worked paycheck to paycheck, just like everybody else does. And it was difficult to break out of those paradigms that you set up during that period. And that's what I think like a lot of people are going to come into a lot of money. I think the hardest piece for most people when they do come into a lot of money is going to be changing those paradigms about how they think about money. And if you don't, you're probably going to lose it. And I don't want to be I don't say that to be mean or spiteful or anything or demeaning. I've seen it happen. I've seen people, come into a lot of money and buy a bunch of liabilities, and then the money doesn't last for forever. If you don't know how to preserve wealth and grow wealth over the long term, if it's not structured the right way, if you don't have the right guidance and professionals around you, and you've never done this before, it's a skill. It's a learned thing. And that's why, wealthy families do a lot to be able to educate their children and teach them all these things. You don't get it in school. And if your parents don't know it, you just don't get it. And so I try to come on here and explain a lot of these things and hopefully, open your eyes to a lot of that stuff so that you go do your own research, look at these financial products and all these things so that you can educate yourself. All the information's out there. It's boring. A lot of it's boring. I will say that. But if it's something that you can actually implement and use, that's when, it makes a big difference. I've been told that I need to mention the tax service. We have started that. So if you do need help with your taxes this year, you can go to digitalfamilyoffice.io. And we don't do the taxes. We are not providing tax advice. We work with a trusted party in order to be able to file those returns. But if you need that help, if you have a W-2 and some crypto transactions and it's a basic return, we can absolutely help you get that done. If you have some more complicated stuff, we can do that too, but it's going to cost more than the initial $500. that we charge for just, a return on your LLC for your digital assets and your basic, W-2 that you are, dealing with. So again, you go to digitalfamilyoffice.io and go to the tax page and schedule that if it's something you're interested in. Or you can just reach out to taxdesk@digitalfamilyoffice.io if you have some questions. We got Rot Corp. Hey, what's going on? They say, oh, great. And learned XRP professor. I'm still hodling. I'm still hodling, but struggling to hodl the faith. So I would, I don't get super religious on here. I don't make it my platform. I talk to Jesus daily, pray often, ask for guidance and wisdom. But really, people that have faith, you can say that you see God, right? Like there's miracles all around us every single day. But faith is believing in something when there are no physical results to back it up. That is a test of faith. And so, holding XRP, I would say, is a test of faith. If you believe in something and before other people see it, some people will call you crazy. I'm okay with being the crazy guy. I've already said that because I'm pretty confident that we are betting against the consensus and we're going to be right. This is probably going to be one of the few times in my life that I'm able to bet against the consensus before other people see it and take advantage of it. And so, if you're doing that, if you're holding XRP, if you are struggling with things, pray about it. I don't know your relationship with the creator or the universe or God, whatever you want to call it. But I will say that it has helped me immensely. So that would be my advice. Buchanan, they say, will the Clarity Act be passed this Thursday? Blessings to you and the Tea Lady. Peace. Thank you for the super chat and the kind words. So it's a markup. So they're going to be looking at it and making sure that it's viable to be voted on. If they do decide to vote on it, then they could, but it would have to go back to the House after the Senate votes on it and passes it. And then once it was passed by the House again, then it could go to the president's desk to be signed into law. So, you've got all these different pieces of government and the roles that they play. And it's still going to be a while. It's not like they could just run it through. Now, if there's a crisis, we saw what they did during COVID, right? We saw them run legislation through in 3 days in order to be able to get, everything up and going and stimulate the economy and all that stuff again. And there was a lot of stuff that got put into those bills that people didn't necessarily want passed, but they had to get something passed, so they got it done. I don't know that I want that situation for crypto. I would like it to be a little bit more thoughtful than that, but there could be a situation where, we need legislation right now in the US and it's as good as it's going to get and they ram it through there. But without a situation like that transpiring, I think it is going to be a bit longer process. We've got Japan elections on February 8th. Expect the reverse carry trade past election. It's possible. There's a reason that they're, doing the election. It's to remove people from parliament over there. This is a good way to be able to do that. You've seen it done a few times in their history. And so it's possible. It's also possible that it would play out beforehand and they could blame it on all those people so that they could get the people they wanted elected. We'll have to see. There is some news I did want to mention that I didn't talk about at the beginning of this about Japan declaring XRP a financial asset or financial infrastructure, which would be completely different than any other asset out there. I do think that that's likely to happen there in Japan. We've had Yoshitaka Katao, who is the principal of SBI, advocate for XRP and Ripple and R3 for a long time. They're a 10% owner in Ripple, 10% owner in R3. And I met them, it was last year in DC at an AI and blockchain conference. Got to talk to SBI Asia, while I was there, and they definitely love XRP. So I do think, with their position there and the authority that they have in the region, it's highly likely that we will see Japan declare XRP a financial asset or financial infrastructure, which just continues to bode for its success. We got Brent. He says, "Hey Jake, LLC and Trust on board. Awesome, dude. Glad to be working with you. Looks like they are working hard to keep price around $2. Can it be tracked to who is selling onto the exchanges? Just enough to do this. God bless. Thank you." Appreciate you, Brent. And again, blessed and grateful to be working with you. As far as being able to track and trace these sells, you would be able to see that on the exchanges. Now, to be able to discern who it was specifically, you would probably need chain analysis. You would need MasterCard's software that they use to be able to trace all crypto transactions across any network back to who initiated them. So I'm sure MasterCard probably knows. But as far as your ability to tell, you'd be able to look at the on-chain analytics. You could go back to the origin wallet and who created that wallet and what wallet was used to create that wallet. There's a chain of events that take place that you can look at through XRP scan to be able to figure out, trace it all the way back if you wanted to. But it is a deep, deep rabbit hole at this point. There's 7.5 million wallets on the XRPL. So to be able to trace it back to the origin wallet and then figure out who that was associated with just by on-chain analytics would be fairly difficult unless it is Ripple or some of the original people that have their name on the wallets, which could be. We got Nitro. They say, "Good evening, boss. What's going on?" He says, "Mastermind Carbon One, awesome. LLC and bank account are all done. When and how do we get accredited to be able to use DWP after price appreciation?" That's a great question. And again, thank you for being proactive. You're doing a fantastic job. So there are 3 ways to be accredited here in the US. The first is through net worth. And that would be you have to have at least $1 million in net worth outside of the equity in your home. You can't include your house. So, if XRP appreciates, I think a lot of people will immediately become accredited because they will then have more than $1 million in net worth outside their home. The other 2 ways that you can be accredited here in the US is one through income. So if you are single, you need tax returns that show over the past 2 years that you've made at least $200,000. If you are married, that goes to $300,000 that you have to show on 2 years worth of tax returns in order to be able to meet that qualification. And the last way, which is the least fun way, is you can take your Series 65. And if you pass that, you have to register with a broker. You have to maintain your continuing education. You have to disclose all of your investments to the SEC on a quarterly basis, and they will allow you to be accredited if you're doing that, but you don't meet the net worth and income requirements. So again, not the funnest way. I think that they should have a test for you to become accredited. In the UK, they have something called a sophisticated investor, which has there's 5 different stipulations on ways you can become sophisticated over there. One of those is that you have at least 2 years experience in a given field for a certain type of investment. So if you've traded commodities for 2 years, or you worked at a trading desk for equities or private equity, or you've been in the crypto market for 2 years, you qualify as an accredited investor to be able to understand the risks associated with those types of investments and be able to discern whether that's appropriate for you to be able to make that financial obligation or commitment. So unfortunately, we don't have a test. We don't have those other prongs here in the US, and it is only income and net worth is how most people qualify. Wild C says, "When XRP does become mainstream, what happens to the trillions of dollars in Nostro Vostro accounts? Liquidity injects back into the global economy." Very curious. Hope you are enjoying the tea gift. Thank you for all that you. Thank you for the tea, by the way. I really appreciate that. Yeah, there's $27 trillion that's locked up in Nostro Vostro accounts right now globally, that banks would then be able to pull back in and use in some capacity to lend out or do other things with. And they would actually get about 10 times that because of the um, fractional reserve lending that they do. So that $27 trillion would become $270 trillion that they could then, do other stuff with. So that would be much more lucrative for them to be able to do that. Now, I don't know if those count as deposits today on the fractional reserve lending or not. So they may already have access to that liquidity and they're able to rehypothecate it like that. I would need to do more research on it, but at least 27 trillion would be unlocked, which is a lot of money for the banks to be able to do other stuff with, and absolutely would inject a lot of liquidity back into markets. The downside of that would be inflation. If you had that much more money moving around, for as far as M2 velocity of money would pick up, you would see much more inflation. Now, we've talked about this before, but the deflationary pressures of AI and blockchain and all these other progressive technologies converging at once is exceptionally deflationary. And so if you knew you needed to be able to offset that somehow, you would run up M2 money supply, and you would probably unlock, $27 trillion to flow back into the global economy to be able to offset the deflationary pressure. We got K, Legacy. Thank you for the super chat. Thank you very much. They say, have a drink on me. What happens if the Clarity Act is signed and passed before price appreciation? You keep saying we will have price appreciation first, but what if? Thanks for all that you do, man. Well, I will say this. The XRPL has the most on-chain amendments that are curated toward financial products and solutions and infrastructure out of any other chain out there. So even if the Clarity Act were to pass before we saw price appreciation for XRP, it would still be positioned to be the go-to solution in that scenario. But there would be competitors. There are other blockchains that can settle very quickly that would likely compete with the XRPL. And at the time we sit now before the Clarity Act, XRP is uniquely positioned as the only solution in that scenario. So I think it would still do very well. I think there could absolutely still be a supply shock and many of those other things, but I don't think it would be as drastic. And they need it to be very drastic in order to be able to get it to the price they need it to be in order to be able to use it. So I'm going to stick with my thesis and say that XRP will happen, 3 digits will happen before the Clarity Act passes. We are an hour in here, and I am probably going to cut it a little short tonight just because I'm in a hotel, and if I get too loud, there are other people sleeping, and I'm trying to be courteous of other people. Mr. Johnson, he says, stud. What's up, my dude? Number one, who is the competition for the XRPL? And number two, how do we know our XRP taken by government? How do we know our XRP taken by government? I'm assuming you mean won't be taken by the government. Well, I'll say this. They don't need your XRP. Ripple already told me that once. We don't need your XRP. Governments and institutions and enterprises already have, and that's why there's 100 billion of them. Like, that's like part of the reason other people are like, it'll never be a high price. Well, you're not going to be able to get everybody at the table if you don't have a pretty significant supply to be able to dole it out to all these people. They don't care if a few people get rich. I mean, David Schwartz has already said this. And again, not to be a Debbie Downer, but most people are going to mess it up. And I don't think I don't think that they had anticipated somebody like myself would come along and try to figure out these solutions and get them to market before price appreciation. Because I can tell you, talking to the other investment banks and all these other counterparties, they don't care about XRP. There's some large financial institutions that aren't even going to have custody for XRP until July of this year, much less products to be able to generate returns with it. So all that being said, I think they thought most people would just sell it off. They'd be able to buy it cheap that way. And there might be a few people, over the long term that got, enough XRP that they could hang on to some and benefit for multiple generations. And there's really not that many people anyway. Maybe 200,000 people globally, 250,000 people globally that have more than 10,000 XRP. It's not that many. Comparatively, right? Like there's 8 billion people on the planet. To have 250,000, even if it's half a million people that hold more than 10,000 XRP, they don't care. In the grand scheme of things, that's more money that's going to be moving around the economy. People are going to be spending it. People are going to be doing stuff, going on trips, buying stuff. It only helps, right? So the government, I don't think wants, and again, they can't. Like, you can't freeze XRP. You can't claw back XRP. It is the native asset on the chain. So they couldn't, even if they wanted to. And as far as the competition for the XRPL, XLM, right? It's a direct copy of the XRPL. Obviously, they're going after merchant services and peer-to-peer payments and a different demographic than what Ripple's going after and R3 is going after. They're working with large financial institutions for back-end settlement of markets, whereas Stellar and Hyperledger are more focused on low-value payments and streaming payments and micropayments and all that stuff. So that's one. Solana, you could kind of say might be competition, but they don't have side chains. The privacy on that network is not great. Digital identity, KYC, AML, like there's starting to be some solutions there, but still nowhere near as robust as the XRPL. The only other one that I could think of that would be like good competition would probably be Hedera, with their governing council and the way that they position themselves, the total supply, the speed, and the security on that network. Hedera is awesome. HBAR is great. So, and again, most people that I know and we work with have XLM, they have XRP, they have XDC, they have HBAR. They're diversified across, 3 to one guy I talked to a few weeks ago has 72 different crypto investments. I don't think you need that many. I had 13 in 2020 and 2021. So, and those did pretty well. But I went deep on those. It wasn't like I had $100 here, $100 there. It was like $5, $10, $20,000 in each one of those. So, and that can be really meaningful, right? So anyway, all that to say, there is competition, but again, before the Clarity Act's passed, it's just XRP. And then on the other side of that, again, the government, I don't think cares nor needs your XRP to be able to confiscate it from you. We got Remark. They say, hey, Jake, with the Fed buying the yen to stop the bond bleeding, what does that mean for the reverse carry trade and price appreciation? Also, add a disclaimer to your opening. I'll work on that. I try to remember. Oh, the other disclaimer. The opinions stated here are my opinions. They are not the opinions of Digital Ascension Group or Digital Wealth Partners, which is an SEC registered RIA. So thank you for reminding me on the other disclaimer. This is kind of a last ditch effort by the Fed to be able to stave this off. And again, if you were Trump, if you were Trump and you wanted them to lower interest rates because you knew that's what they needed to do, you would, pursue them, and then you would also force their hand with oil. A lot of people are saying, oh, Trump won't, cause oil to spike. If it gets him all the other stuff that he wants, and it's not going to spike for that long. All he's got to do is cause the Strait of Hormuz to shut down for a short period of time. It doesn't even have to be more than a couple days. That's enough to disrupt the supply chain and cause all of this to unfold. And it gives them a scapegoat, right? This person says, "You look very different tonight." I'm just wearing a polo, and I have a little bit different light here, so I don't look as red. I was, fiddling with stuff before we got going tonight. So appreciate, I don't know if those are kind words or if you're just making a statement, but thanks for noticing. Anyway, so back to the Fed and then buying the yen. They got to strengthen it. Otherwise, the Bank of Japan's out of cards to play. And if they let it get over, if they let the inflation continue to rise there in their economy, they're going to have to raise interest rates. So they need to strengthen the yen. You've already seen Warren Buffett buy yen, swap his treasuries for yen to be a lender. The Fed's doing the same now. That tells me we are very, very close to this playing out. Trish, she says, "Curious, my friend Sam would like to know, how can you help the small guy that has less than 3,000 XRP? Will they be safe?" Yeah, you'll be fine. Just hold it on a cold wallet. Like if you have 3,000 XRP today, it's $2, it's $6,000. You might put $6,000 in your house. Somebody steals $6,000, it sucks, but it's not the end of the world. If you got $1 million on a ledger or $100,000 on a ledger, when you get 6-7 digits in crypto, you probably want that in institutional custody. You probably don't want to keep that in your safe or your desk drawer or in a PO box or a lock box or a safety deposit box, right? That's when it becomes real money for most people. And that's why our thresholds are where they are. And that's where it makes economical sense. And you'll be there on the other side of price appreciation. At $1,000 XRP, you got $3 million if you got 3,000 XRP. So, you will be just fine. I know people, and maybe I've caused some of this. I've just opened people's eyes to these other options and how to be proactive and all that. But if you don't have, at least $50,000 to $80,000 in digital assets, hold it on a cold wallet. You probably don't need an LLC yet. You probably don't need a living trust yet. Now, if you do believe it's going to go to much higher prices, maybe the living trust, right? It's $500. Set that up, and do, you can put just the crypto into the living trust and have the assignment that way and not the LLC. The LLC comes into benefit for creditor protection and anonymity, and you can set that up later, post price appreciation. So, again, I try not to cultivate FOMO or anything like that. I probably don't do a good job of that sometimes because I do want people to be proactive and I do think this stuff matters. But, as far as the small guy goes, I don't think you're a small guy. I mean, there's only 7.5 million wallets globally. And if you've got 3,000, you're in the top 10% of holders. You're in the top 750,000 wallets. That's less than 1 million people on the planet that have what you have. And it's actually a lot less than that because most people that have more have multiple wallets. It's not like they just have one. So, maybe it's 500,000 people that have more than 3,000 XRP on the whole planet. You're doing awesome. And I would just sit on my hands would be my advice. Again, that I can't tell you what to do. I can just tell you what I'm doing. Honest Aim, good to see you. He says, "Mr. Legacy, hi to the tea lady, wherever she is. Speaking of February 18th, Trump Jr.'s World Liberty Forum is Mar-a-Lago. Might you be going with 1+ billion assets under management? Thanks for your leadership. Blessings." Appreciate you. I will not be at Mar-a-Lago for that one. I can tell you where I'm going to be on February 18th. Let's take a look here. I will be at ETH Denver that week. So unfortunately, I won't be going there. We will be at ETH Denver. We're going to have all of our advisors there at ETH Denver, which is going to be awesome. Going to be like 27 people that we're going to fly in over there to Denver to be able to meet with all of our advisors. So if you're going to be there, we are hosting a meetup with Ray Fuentes there at ETH Denver for XRP night. We're sponsoring that. Would love to see you guys there. I think he's going to have some other fantastic speakers, come out in force. And we would love to see you guys out there in Denver for that event. I'm definitely not going to get to all the super chats tonight. So if I miss it, please send it to us on other social media. Just DM us. And my wonderful wife will get it over to me so that we can make sure we get to it on the next live. Jordan, he says, will we be able to repay real estate and business operating loans that are written in dollars with worthless dollars once reset is complete, or will banks be able to force repricing of repayment? This is really the game that everybody's played for the past 50 years, right? They borrow money, they get the purchasing power when they borrow it, they buy an asset with it, and then the purchasing power of the dollar goes down and you're able to repay those loans with cheaper and cheaper money over the long term. That's why people that, started their real estate portfolio in the 90s or late 80s have crushed it. And if they made it past 2008. So I think that they're going to stabilize the dollar. I don't think the dollar is going anywhere. All these people that are fear mongering that think the dollar is just, a dying currency that's going to be gone. I don't think that's the case. I think that they're going to shore it up with gold. Again, we talked about the 50-year gold-backed treasury that they're going to announce this year on July 4th. I think that they're going to be able to, instill trust in our currency again. And I'm excited for that. So, when all of these treasuries are inevitably sold off by the foreign holders because the reverse carry trade unwinds, we've got people here that want to issue stable coins that are going to soak up all of that to be able to stabilize the bond market. So not really concerned about it, but it is a good idea. One idea, and again, not advocating for this at all. Okay, this is just something that I have thought about, is borrowing Tether. And very similar to like Luna or UST, when that depegged, you would be able to pay that back with a lot cheaper money. So I don't know if Tether is going to depeg. That's my thesis, my new thesis that goes along with the domino theory with the reverse carry trade unwinding. I feel like Tether is going to depeg when that happens. And if you did have a loan out on Tether, and Tether dropped to like 50 cents, you'd be able to pay that back with half the amount of money if it was sitting somewhere else that you converted it back to Tether. So if you wanted to short Tether, borrowing Tether would probably be the way to do it. Again, not advocating for this, not giving financial advice, just talking about, thought experiments that I've personally had. DFW Mike, my man, he says, evening, Jake. Enjoyed your latest videos and podcast. Info is worth every asset under management. This snow and ice needs to go. There are Dallas and Texas meetups to plan. Thanks for everything. Mike does a fantastic job over there in the mastermind of orchestrating multiple meetups for mastermind members there in Texas. So if you're in Texas and you want to go meet other cool people that have aligned interest, we've already started to see this in all parts of the country. People there in the mastermind, we have over 16,000 people that are in the Discord. I think 18,000 people total that are part of the mastermind that participate in these events, real life events where you get to go meet other cool people and hang out and create relationships before price appreciation so that you have cool people to do stuff with on the other side of it. So again, appreciate Mike and all that he does for the community and for the kind words and super chat this evening. We got 19 trades. They say, do you think the reverse carry trade will unwind while the government shut down? It's possible. I don't, with everything escalating there in the Middle East, I wouldn't put it past them. Sean says, hey, Jake, what do you see happening first? Middle East currency revaluation around oil or XRP reaches $1,000? I had a conversation a little bit earlier today with another gentleman about the revaluation of the dinar and the other currencies over there in the Middle East. Many people believe that the currency that they're currently holding will be what's revalued. I don't think that'll be the case. I think that they will issue new currency and there'll be an exchange rate between the old currency and the new currency. I would love to be wrong about that. We have clients that have pallets of dinar and dong and zim and the other stuff. So, would love to be wrong. I would love those people to make a lot of money. But I don't think that they're going to revalue the currency that's currently issued and out. I think they'll issue a new currency and there'll be an exchange rate. Now, which one of those happens first? It may be simultaneous. I don't, it's hard to gauge. Again, like I see all the dominoes, what order they fall in. Your guess is as good as mine on some of that stuff. But that's definitely a piece of it. Oil is going to play a big role in the new financial system. Again, I think they're going to peg it to gold in a certain ratio. And that's going to be the peg that is the stability for everything else, for sovereign currencies being backed by both those commodities and potentially XRP. And, that's the Middle East is obviously going to back their currency with oil. So I'm going to say, because, gun to my head, I'll pick one for you. I think XRP will be $1,000 before, maybe barely before they do the revaluation on all those currencies. I don't think you're going to be able to do one and then the other. I'll put it that way. I think they're going to happen very close in tandem, one before the other. It'd be great to parlay that, right? But this person says, "Howdy, legend. Interested in hearing about Altruist." Oh, cool. So at Digital Wealth Partners, we have traditional wealth management. It's not something that's a huge part of our business, but we do have clients that have equities and bonds and other assets that they're invested in, and they want a holistic advice around their portfolio. So we do have the ability. The advisors over there have that ability to be able to manage your stock portfolio and all those other things. Altruist is the platform that they use to be able to do that. And they're able to provide you financial advice across everything that you are invested in. Because they have their Series 65. They're able to give financial advice on securities. Wormhole. This is interesting. So I did a podcast with their CEO. This is probably 6 months ago that we had them on the channel. So I would encourage you to go back and watch that episode. In that episode, and also like before we got on the podcast, we were talking, and I brought up acquisition. And when you get that, like I said, sometimes I just get visceral reactions from people in conversations about stuff. That made him uncomfortable. And he kind of danced around it and wanted to say, well, it's a nonprofit, that isn't going to happen type thing. That may be another one that Ripple might acquire, because somebody asked me that earlier. Wormhole acts as a bridge across different, blockchains to allow them to be interoperable. That would be an interesting acquisition by Ripple. Wormhole would be. Now, the W token is a governance token. It doesn't actually move value. Do I think it'll be valuable over the long term? Potentially. But as far as, and in my investment thesis, it's not something that I hold, but that doesn't mean, other people don't want to hold it. Quant. I don't hold Quant anymore. I made a bunch of money on Quant and then sold it all. Other people think Quant is the best thing since sliced bread. Other people think Chainlink is the best thing since sliced bread. I'm not here to tell anybody what the next best thing is. I'm just going to talk about what I understand, my thesis, where I'm invested, and then you guys can make your own financial decisions. Again, take everything I say with a grain of salt. But again, you asked about Wormhole. That's my insider, my spidey senses are tingling on that one. Taylor says, thanks for your content. Love the information you provide every week. There was supposed to be a transaction for 589 billion on the XRPL. If this is true, how is it possible at $2 XRP? Yeah, you could send that today. You know, you'd have to have a lot of XRP to send that payment. Well, I guess you're right. That wouldn't be possible today because total market cap is call it 200 billion. Yeah, you wouldn't be able to send that type of transaction until there was more liquidity in the token, and you would really need like quadrillions in liquidity to be able to send that level of transaction across the network. I don't know what you're buying for 589 billion. Like I don't know who's exchanging that much money. Somebody would have to be buying SpaceX or a large company like that in order for that to happen. But you could issue yeah, I don't see a way that could happen today. I would love to see the transaction. If you want to share it in the chat, happy to look at it. And again, look, I'm not the end all be all. I know enough to be dangerous. If you want to go like ask Matt Hamilton, who understands the XRPL and its liquidity, or David Schwartz, they could probably give you a much better answer than I'm going to give you. Cotton Clark says, hey Jake, I'm indeed a legend. Appreciate that, man. Saw you on Verson's program today. The four of you were Mount Rushmore of XRP. Jake Claver, Verson, David, Digital Outlook, and Ito. Outstanding Gold Rocket. Appreciate you, man. I really enjoyed that. Like I said, glad to be on there with those guys. Don't always agree on how we're going to get there, but we all agree that we're going to get there. And that's what matters at the end of the day. I am probably going to wrap it up in another 3 minutes here. Again, just being out of town, I don't want to be too loud for the neighbors. And again, if I missed your super chat, please send it to us on social media. You can also DM the moderators over there in Discord, and they can get it to me if you're in the mastermind. We got B Magic says, hey Jake, would you mind speaking on the sheer scale of the XRP network that could be deployed? No numbers, but what you can share. Thanks. I talked about this last week a little bit. I don't remember if it was here on the live. I think it was. As we have AI agents and we have humanoid robots, I know this sounds like some sci-fi stuff. Bear with me, okay? These things are coming. They're not going to be here tomorrow, but over the next 3 to 5 years, I do think that they're absolutely going to become a reality. The total GDP of the world is currently constrained by capita, or the number of people participating in an economy or a business. On the other side of these technologies being implemented, there is no limit. It becomes infinite, the GDP that we can produce. So you need something to be able to scale to that. And a lot of people are like, well, Bitcoin's got 21 million. That makes sense. Cool. I get that. I get the thesis behind the supply and demand and all those things to be able to drive the price that high. If you're going to be moving value between all of these economies that are going to exist at scale and you tokenize everything and move it on chain, you need something that's hugely scalable. And that is the XRPL. You have payment channels, you have side chains, and old Bob Way has a patent on subnet for the XRPL. And that's what gives it the juice to be able to get to like, 30, 50, 100,000 TPS. When I talked to Matt Hamilton about it, he said if there was an implicit or explicit subnet on the XRPL, it effectively would be infinitely scalable. So, there you have it. Again, that's not from me. That's from Matt Hamilton. One of the people that I just mentioned, probably should provide you the answer on the other question about $589 billion moving across the XRPL. I listen to people that are smarter than me. And I don't take their word as gospel. I think critically through things. I make my own decisions around stuff. But at the end of the day, there's not another network out there that's even close to the scalability of the XRPL, in my opinion. Trying to see, we got one more here. Well, let me check over here. I can see if, there we go. Yeah, we got, I did that one. Here's one. Sean says, Jake, my man, Beyond Broke Mastermind here. I'm in the Netherlands where crypto is taxed even if unsold. Oh my gosh. Search click SVB is the name of this person. Want to move to Portugal with zero tax after price appreciation? Should I move my XRP cold wallet into an LLC or wait until I'm a fiscal resident? Any EU locations? So, well, I've got another one up here. I've read the wrong one. We'll get to that one in a second. Portugal's great. Cyprus is also great. We have partners in both those jurisdictions to be able to help people structure LLCs or corporations or trusts in either one of those. A lot of people are moving to Dubai or the UAE into free zones there to be able to participate with no income tax, only a 6% business tax in that jurisdiction. No capital gains on crypto. Puerto Rico, here in the US has that 4% flat tax. Switzerland, Luxembourg, 2 other locations there in the EU that aren't too bad. But yeah, happy to make introductions to Marcio, who we work with over there in Cyprus and Portugal. If you want to email us at info@digitalfamilyoffice.io and ask for those contacts, we're happy to share them with you so that you can be proactive and get that set up before price appreciation. Because if you wait till after, the government's going to get theirs. We got information one. They say, Jake, I have a question about doing the taxes. I've swapped around $4,000 in alts for XRP. I'm definitely lower today in this dip. Without appreciation, will I still take a tax hit? Just looking for general opinion. I don't know when you swapped them. If you did them at the end of last year and you were down from your original purchase price, then you had capital losses. So you get to roll those forward. If you were up on those positions that you sold for XRP, yes, you would have, short term if you bought them within the same year, long term if you bought them more than a year ago, capital gains on those on that investment. It's not going to be that much though. I mean, it's $4,000, so it's just going to go with your other income that you made if it's short term capital gains. And it's just going to, call it, if you bought it at $2,000 and went to $4,000, that's an additional $2,000 for the income that you're going to have taxes on. It should be fairly easy to offset if you're working with a good CPA. And then I want to touch on the LLC one more time. Liners just got it up here. If you do need a holding company to be able to manage your digital assets, you've got at least $50,000 to $80,000 in total portfolio value. We would love to work with you to structure that for you, make sure that you get all the protections for the creditor protection alongside the anonymity, the full breadth of the tax code to be able to offset things as things move forward here and we do see price appreciation. All you got to do is go to digitalfamilyoffice.io and use the code 50OFF50 OFFDAG-LLC. They get you everything end to end for $2,000, including the operating agreement, which would normally cost you somewhere between $1,500 and $2,500 working with an attorney to get. Again, that's specific for digital assets, and we continue to update that on a fairly regular basis for people that have purchased the LLC from us. As regulation changes and laws change, those things do need updated, and we work with our clients to make sure that they're in the best spot. If you need a trust alongside that, again, it's $500. The assignment, if you want to use the code Webinar Trust, gets you $200 off the assignment of the LLC to the trust at checkout there on digitalfamilyoffice.io. We have taxes. If you need your taxes for your crypto done this year, along with your other W-2 income and basic stuff, you can go to the website and we will connect you with the right people. Trying Trying to think if there's anything else. The mastermind, I didn't even, tout the mastermind tonight, but we would love to have you in there. If that's something you're interested in, go to beyondbroke.com. We have over 18,000 people that are there every single month, all across the world at this point, that have aligned interest in digital assets and getting better. People that want better for themselves and better for their families, to be able to protect their investments, and learn, the financial education to set them up for success over multiple generations. You can use the code Beyond Broke, all capitalized, the number 1, and then MO, like Mary Oscar, gets you the first month for a little bit of a discount there in social or Carbon One. And then this is the last month for social. So if you want to try it out for $20, you got 5 days left. And then we will be adding no more social members over the long term. So, it'll be a minimum of $100 to join the group. And if we do see, more than $10 XRP, we're going to lock it down. No more members. It will be invite only, and it will be much, much more expensive to participate there. And then last but not least, if you do need wealth management for your digital assets, you want somebody to talk to be able to help you make those decisions, you just go to digitalwealthpartners.net. That's digitalwealthpartners.net. Go to the contact us form, and you can set up time with an advisor, institutional custody, lines of credit against your assets, and ways to be able to generate return on them. And I think that we're going to have more of those in the very near future. So with that, I'm going to wrap it. Hope you guys have a wonderful night. Thank you again for taking time out of your Monday to come hang out with me. We'll be back Wednesday. God bless, and we'll see you on the next one.